That's all right. Good morning. Good morning. I hope you all have as much discussion during the class. That'd be great. Well, it's a beautiful day. It's good to see everybody out here this morning, isn't it? It's beautiful. How about a spoken prayer request anywhere in the sanctuary? Okay, Steve. Ruby? Okay. Any others?
Keep our family in your prayers. We've got a sister-in-law in Montana that's dealing with cancer. I've got several kids on the bus that's sick, and just ask you to watch over them and watch over our families.
Donna?
I still remember all the lost in my family. But also remember my granddaughter. She did have her baby last week, and the baby's doing wonderful. And weighed 5 pounds, 11 ounce little girl. And Kayla's doing fine. She had an episode that set her back yesterday, but she's been real nervous about her upcoming pathology reports. They haven't gotten those back yet, so she definitely needs our prayers. And so does her husband. He's doing a good job at tending to them.
Yeah.
Also remember Jamie Carr's sister-in-law, Debbie Worley. That's Marvin's sister. They stand in need of prayer. Remember Rosa. Katie said she's sick this morning. So just many needs within our family.
Okay. Richard?
Tim, I do want to give God praise. My mom started driving last week, so just give God all the praise for that. So still continue praying for her as she goes through therapy. Remember Tommy, Van unspoken prayer request. Remember her family, Alex and Tori, and always remember Dr. Pfizer and the Pfizer family. They still need an uplifting prayer.
Okay. Richard?
Remember Rose Knight? She's in North Carolina. She's got 4-stage cancer. Of course, we know the Lord could miraculously heal her, but if He sees not to, I pray that her transition will be quick and painless.
Yeah.
She is a Christian. She is rejoicing that she knows where she's going. And also remember Susan Richmond. She's going in for hip replacement surgery Tuesday.
Any other requests this morning?
Remember, there's someone in my family, they didn't want to use their name, but they got a spot on their kidneys, and they only have one kidney, so they donate the other kidney to the brother. But anyway, God knows who they are, so I guess.
Sis, you had a...
Remember Nettie and my family, and especially the 14-year-old granddaughter.
Yes. Janice?
I still remember Buddy and Georgia Freeman and her sister, and our nation, our missionaries, law enforcement, Russia and Ukraine. I still have 2 sisters that need prayer and have an unspoken.
I saw a hand over here. Yeah.
Yeah. My sister Jeanette and my brother Tim, they both have cancer, and they just need prayer.
Yeah, Mike.
My family.
Okay. Any others? Ronnie?
Can you remember me and my family? Remember my 2 brothers, my son Kenny, and daughter Jeannie, and remember Debbie this morning.
Well, our needs are many, aren't they? But what a privilege we have that we can call upon the one that can do something about that, right? How about unspoken requests? I ask you to stand, please. Let's remember our services today. And if you don't have anyone to pray for your neighbor there. He needs you. He needs your prayers. Mason, if you would open us up, please.
Our most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning. We just want to stop and thank you for another day. Bless and most of all, thank you for our salvation. We ask you today, Lord, just to be with these many prayer requests that's been made known here today, Lord. Those that have been unspoken, we ask you to be with those. We ask you to bless him as he does the teaching this morning along with the other teachers, Lord. We ask you to bless Brother Luke as he delivers the message this morning. For today, we ask you just to watch over us all, go through the service throughout the day, Lord, and just guide us and direct us. Help us today, Lord, that we'll always be found pleasing you and give you praise in Jesus' name.
Amen. Last lesson in our booklet here, page 57. The Kinsman Redeemer. Well, today we're going to pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago. A couple weeks ago on the 13th, Sunday the 13th, we had our first lesson in Ruth. Then we had the Easter lesson last Sunday, so today we're jumping back into Ruth to finish our study out on Ruth. So when I look at the title, The Kinsman Redeemer, what was that? Let's talk about that for just a second. In ancient Israel society, a kinsman redeemer was responsible for taking care of a relative that would be in. Family was so important to the ancient Israelites, and to keep the family intact, and to help a family member that was in trouble. This was actually part of the Mosaic law, was this kinsman redeemer clause and what it entailed. So what was that? You took care of relatives in trouble, in need. You bought back property that they might have had to sold in to pay a debt. You would buy that back for your relative. That was one of the duties of the kinsman redeemer. It would ensure that family that stays intact, that doesn't get chopped up and split up, and also there was a continuation in marriage and childbearing that a kinsman redeemer would play a role in, and we'll see that. There was a requirement that you had to marry your brother's widow to continue that family line in place. And that's what we're going to see also with what happens with Boaz, is he was related to Ruth's husband, who has now passed away, as we know from our last lesson. So how important, we're talking about family, how important was keeping Ruth's lineage in place? Who came from Ruth's lineage? Jesus, exactly. So you can see what role Boaz plays here as this kinsman redeemer. Yes, he ends up with the woman that he loves. We're going to see that, and they live happily ever after, right? But there was also a vital link in our Savior's earthly family, right? That bond, that chain was still in place because of the kinsman redeemer. So we're going to pick back up in our study in Ruth. 2 weeks ago, back on the 13th, we did our first phase of Ruth lesson. And we were introduced to this family. Real quickly, we're just going to summarize. A man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi. There is a drought in Bethlehem, Judah, and they decide to pick up and move out of Judah, and they move to Moab. They have 2 sons. Elimelech, her husband, passes away. The 2 sons marry Moabite women from that region. Then the 2 sons die. So now we have Naomi with 2 daughters-in-laws. Naomi decides it's time to go back to Judah. She pleads with her 2 daughters-in-laws to go back to their mother's home, stay there, start your life here in your home territory, start over again.
your chances will be better. One daughter-in-law, Orpah, does exactly that. The other, Ruth, says, no, I am staying with you, Naomi. She makes a statement of faith in God, and she tells Naomi, I want your God to be my God. They go back to Bethlehem, Judah, and we're just paraphrasing here. Ruth goes to a farm that's owned by a wealthy farmer. He's a bachelor. His name is Boaz. He notices her, and he's impressed by her. He gives her special privileges and protection while she's gleaning. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, what that meant. She's gleaning in the field there to gather food for her and her mother-in-law. He starts having conversations with her. He notices her. He's impressed by her. I think she was physically a beautiful woman based on his response when he first saw her. But not only is that got his eye, but he's also got to know this woman and know the heart that she has, her demeanor, her faithfulness to leave her home and care for her mother-in-law as she has done. Boaz has taken all this in. He has seen all this, and he's very impressed by it. We know that how chapter 2 closes out, back and not in our text, but I think it's important. It says in the last verse in chapter 2 tells us that Ruth kept close to the maidens of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest. The barley harvest was about 6 weeks long. So you can see there's some time. There's been several weeks where she's coming back to this farm. It's not in our text. It's not even in God's word, but I'm sure that during that 6 weeks there was more interaction between Boaz and Ruth. He's really getting to know her, right? So today we jump back into the Ruth study, and our text starts up at chapter 3, verse 6. So always when they skip chunks of text, I just like to briefly touch on what y'all know it's a pet peeve of mine. You hear me say it every Sunday, don't you? But I like to tie it all together. So our text starts at chapter 3, verse 6. What have we missed? Well, here's what we missed. Naomi devises a plan. She's trying to become this matchmaker, if you will, for Boaz and Ruth. They know she's probably noticed how Boaz is smitten by her. You know, Naomi sees this. Being an older, wiser lady, she's going to come up with. She starts talking to Ruth. Skipped verse 2 in the text of chapter 3. This man is Naomi tells her, this man is your kinsman redeemer. You have a right to claim him. Go for it. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what she tells her. You know, she's explaining the situation here. There's an opportunity here. Verse 3, paraphrasing, wash yourself, put on the perfume, put on your best raiment. You know, go after this guy, basically. So, verse 4, which is skipped, but I think it's important. A feast is happening. The harvest time is over, so they have this feast to celebrate the end of the harvest. She says, wait for him. This is Naomi telling Ruth, not in our text, but I think it's neat. She says, wait for him to lie down after he has eaten and drank, then go in to where he is at. This is from verse 4, not in our text. Uncover his feet and lie down there. Now, lying at his feet in the traditions and all of the time was symbolic to submission to the man, okay? And she says, it's actually from Ezekiel 16:8, mentions this custom where a groom covered his bride with a fringed garment as a symbol of his protection and his authority over her. So Naomi's giving her some good coaching here, right? Here's how you're going to get this guy, right? So anyway, in verse 5, skip verse 5, not in our text, Naomi says, I will do as you say. So that's where our text starts today. So I just wanted to kind of go over that, and we'll just read it from there. How's that? Anybody got any thoughts before we get started? Naomi's looking after her daughter-in-law, right? Wanting to get her out of the house, huh? All right, I'll read the first verse. You guys read after me. It says, "And she went down unto the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her.
And when Boaz had eaten and drank, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came forward and uncovered his feet, and laid her down.
And it came to pass as midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet.
And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman.
And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman.
And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit there is kinsman nearer than I.
Tarry this night, and it shall be in morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of the kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning."
Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, hath purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. Okay. So, back to verses 6 and 7. We have this celebration. It's the end of the harvest. And Ruth does exactly as Naomi had previously instructed her to do. After this celebration, Boaz lies down, it says, where was it at? Yeah, verse 7. They have this celebration. He does, as Naomi said he would. He lays down. It says he lays down at the end of the heap of corn. So I want to ask you, this is a wealthy guy. You know he's probably got a nice bedroom up at the house. Why is he laying down on the threshing floor by the pile of corn? They call it corn. It's barley. Probably tired. Do you think that's unusual?
Just like thieves.
Who said thieves? Yeah, I say he was tired. But back then, you got to remember, when we went through our study, this is during the period of the Judges. It was not a friendly area, right? There was a lot of bad stuff going on. Sleeping on the threshing floor. Farmers would sleep near their crops when they were harvested to protect from thieves. That's how bad things were. And so that's why he was on the threshing floor. You know, I thought, well, why is this wealthy guy, sleeping on the floor
Maybe
beside?
that's where he was planted, been able to come in contact with Ruth.
Maybe.
That was my thought.
Could have been.
I was gonna think if somebody steals a whole armload of barley,
Yeah.
that's not threshing, that's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But you steal barley already threshed.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot of work to get just that much, isn't it?
Yeah.
The way they had to do it back then. It says she came softly, just as Naomi instructed. She uncovers Boaz's feet, and she lays down. Verse 8. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself. How many of y'all sleep really sound and stay in one position? I roll over, like every hour I roll over and go. I think that's what Boaz was doing. You know how he rolled over to get in a different position. And there's this person, right? And it says, and behold, he says, he was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Think about it. He purposely slept there just to protect that crop, we believe. And yet, he had to be scared when he woke up and there was someone there. His whole reason for being there was to protect the crops, and yet someone slipped in anyway, didn't they? But they wasn't there to steal the crops. But still, you could see it probably startled him a great deal, right? To wake up and there's someone there with him. But it says, yeah, exactly. And he says in verse 9, "Who art thou?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman." You got to like the boldness of Ruth here. She's kind of the one instigating. You know, she's been this meek and humble person all through this, but following Naomi's coaching, she puts it right out here. You're my kinsman. You're my kinsman. My next, thou art my near kinsman. In other words, I am proposing to you. Basically, is what she's doing here. If you look at everything we've looked at, how it all unfolds. Remember our beginning of our lesson, we talked about the kinsman redeemer. That was even the title of our lesson. It was put into the Mosaic law to ensure the continuation of the family line. So she's basically telling Boaz here, I want you as my kinsman redeemer. Now we know already from previous studies and previous texts out of Ruth, Boaz is in love with this girl. He really likes her, and that's there's not a question there. We talked about her beauty, yes, but her heart, her personality, her faith, her work ethic, humbleness. He's mentioned enough in our text that we already know he's pretty impressed by her. So he awakes, and there she is, covered by part of his garment, laying at his feet. In short, all this whole scenario is, if you look at their customs and the Mosaic law at the time, this constitutes a marriage proposal, don't it? Yes. So how does Boaz respond to the statement? I think that's important. It says a lot right there. Again, skip verse 10. Boaz saw nothing strange in Ruth's actions. Some men would have jumped up and said, "Woman, you're crazy. What are you doing here?" Right? Not Boaz. Not Boaz. Yeah. He appears to be flattered. He is flattered that she would want to be with him, that she would desire to marry him. Because verse 11, "And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman." So quickly, Boaz puts her mind at ease. You got to, as soon as Ruth made that statement, in her mind she's like, I wonder how this is going to go, right? Would you have some? Wouldn't you be thinking this? And he puts her mind at ease quickly. He says he puts her mind at ease by promising her, "I'll do everything that you ask." He has no reservations at all. We know he's enamored by this girl. Her devotion to Naomi, her conduct during all this time of the barley harvest that she's been interacting with him, and people in the community getting to see her and know about her. It says she's known in the area as a virtuous woman. Again, we talked about how your example, people see your example, right? And Boaz is telling her, people in the community know you're a virtuous woman. So, anyway. Now, here's something interesting about Boaz, too, and someone Mike might have touched on it. He's already studied up on her, hasn't he? Verse 12, he says, "And know it's true, I am your near kinsman. Howbeit there's a kinsman nearer than I." Uh-oh. This could be detrimental, couldn't it, to Ruth's proposal, Naomi's plan. He tells her, "Yeah, I'm aware that I'm your near kinsman," but he tells her there's another guy closer, related to your deceased husband than I. So, how did he know this? He's been studying. He's done the research, right? He was waiting for this moment, wasn't he? He was ready for it. He just got woken up in the middle of the night by this woman because he rolled over and touched her. And he knows all of this already. That tells me he was doing some homework, wasn't he? He was doing some studying on Ruth. I thought he'd already investigated all of this. I thought that was pretty cool how Boaz was already all over it. So, what's that? Yeah, yeah. So, we're going to have to find out what this other guy thinks about this. Is what Boaz is telling her. Because in verse 13 he says, tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, let him do that, kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth. Lie down until the morning. He tells her, just relax, chill, chill. Notice how Boaz don't cut corners here. Boaz does the right thing. He loves her. He wants to be her near kinsman. But he's going to follow through with the legal requirement. That is how it is stated in the law. By getting this other guy's thoughts, the other guy that's nearer related to Ruth's ex-husband, deceased husband. So he says, we got to find out what he thinks about this. Following the law correctly. He's not going to cut corners. Let's do it. What's that? Yeah. I think Boaz really feels if it's God's will, it's going to be, right? That they will end up together. Because for everything to line up as it has so far, going back to Ruth's decision a few years earlier, well, not even a few years, maybe a year earlier, a month earlier, to follow Ruth, be with Ruth, and go to the strange land. For everything to line up as it has, and for these two to meet each other in the way that they have, only God could have done that, right? God was behind it all, and I think Boaz, even though he loves her and he wants her, he's probably at the same time not too upset about this not happening, right? He thinks they will end up together, I believe. So he tells her, if this other person is not interested, then yes, I will do the kinsman's part. Now get some rest. He says, tarry here. Basically, just go back to sleep. Get some rest. Any thoughts so far? Pretty interesting how this is all coming together, isn't it? Now, our text skips, again, several verses, and I'm going to hear me talk about that. We skip several verses. Chapter 3, and skip verses are verses 14 through 18. Ruth wakes in the morning. This is what's skipped, but I want to tell you all this. It says, Boaz gives her 6 measures of barley to take back to her and her mother-in-law. I guess he didn't have any chocolates or roses. He gives her 6 measures of barley.
That's the freedom. I don't see one thing wrong with that.
No. But notice how he's also playing to the mother-in-law's interest too, right? He knows how to do things, don't he? He's going to get on her good side too. Right, Mace? That's how you do that. Paraphrasing here, he tells her to wait and see how things play out concerning this other man. Then our text starts back up in chapter 4, verse 10. So we skip 10 verses in chapter 4 real quick. I'm going to tell you what happens. Boaz, he's going to go through this process of becoming the legal kinsman redeemer. Got to deal with this other gentleman who's more closer related to Mahon, which was her ex-husband. He gets 10 men who are elders in the city with him as witnesses. He meets with the other prospect. The meeting actually results in Boaz purchasing the property that was once owned by Naomi's husband. Remember, they left. During the drought, they left years earlier to go to Moab. So someone took their property. Well, Boaz comes in and buys it back as the kinsman's redeemer. Now, Naomi's has come back into that area. Boaz buys the land back, but he also tells the other gentleman about Ruth, who is it's kind of like part of the package, if you will. And he says, no, I'm not interested. Enough said, right? Yeah. Now, Luke, you ever seen a real estate deal quite like this one? And he says, no, take it. Take the land. And she was a Moabite, okay? And this gentleman didn't believe in marrying outside of the culture. So that played into his decision making too. So anyway, so it works out really well here now for Boaz and Ruth, don't it? He ends up with the property. He ends up with the right to have Ruth. The door is now open for Boaz. Skip verse 9. He tells the elders, you all are witnesses to this. I have bought all of the land that was once owned by this family, which takes us now to our verse 10. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of Mahon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of this place ye are witnesses this day. So not only has Boaz redeemed the property, as we mentioned, he's also been now the redeemer for Ruth. Boaz proclaims proudly and publicly before everybody, before the people, that he has redeemed both them, the property and Ruth. Best of all, Ruth will now become his wife. There's a statement there that says that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren. Again, that's that role of that kinsman redeemer coming in and reassuring that family line stays intact. The family property now is back in the hands of who it rightfully should have been all along. So that's why he mentions that. You know, when I think about one lesson wrapped up in the study of Ruth, is how Ruth followed God's lead when it comes to marriage. And there's a lot of neat stuff in these four chapters, right? But one of the things in this is the thing about marriage here. Remember in our first lesson from chapter 1, Ruth seemed to be leaving her best chance to find a man when she left her home, right? When she left the area that she was from to go with Ruth. You'd have thought at that time that she was walking away from her best chance. But no, she goes with Naomi. She makes a claim that she wants Naomi's God to be her God. And she steps out in faith and puts God first. And what happens? Look what happens. God puts her into a relationship that is better than anything she could have imagined back home, right? So is there a lesson in that for people that are thinking about marriage? Put God first. Put God first and want everything. He'll make sure that things come out the best case scenario, right? For you. And that's what happened here. Yeah, the relationship she has now with her new soon-to-be husband is better than anything she could imagine. So I think it's still relevant. God will bless those wanting to get married if they put him first. But you agree with that? Skip verses 11 and 12. He took 10 witnesses to go see this man. Well, apparently some other people, it must have drew a little bit of a crowd, because now they said there was people at the gates and the 10. So it's funny how the word gets around on it. Hey, I wonder if he's going to, propose to Ruth. Did the rumor get out that what was going on and people from the community wanted to hear about it? I don't know. But it said that there was a gathering of people at the gates as well as the witnesses that he brought. So all those gathered around and the witnesses all endorsed this. They supported this union between Boaz and Ruth, and they showed their support. It's almost like they were cheering, like, yay, So I thought that was pretty neat, and that was left out. But in our verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. They are married, and Ruth gives birth to a son. His name is Obed. Now this family line of the deceased Mahon and Elimelech will now continue through this. We talked about that. This link, this heritage, this family line, Obed will be the father of Jesse, who was the father of King David, right? And then on down that line came our Savior, eventually Jesus. Anybody got any comments? What are you sitting on? You want to share with us? Yes, Mike?
Naomi had to also be a very special lady.
Yeah.
Because without Ruth, she wasn't guaranteed any food or anything.
That's right.
You
That's right.
didn't get that. And once Ruth got with Boaz, there was no guarantee that Naomi would get taken care of.
Yeah.
So she done this selflessly.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's a really neat story. It's really, when you think about all of that. Now, fast forward, and Ruth's not having to go out in the fields and pick anything now, is she? And neither is Naomi. I'm sure Naomi has a seat at the table now, and the servants are bringing them their food, right?
How many guys got mother-in-laws that their wife never had to get their going?
What's that?
How many guys have got mother-in-laws that their wife are just letting them go?
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. But it's really neat when you think about it. The kinsman redeemer and the example Boaz was how you can compare that to Christ. I think that's worth touching on. For Ruth, as Boaz was for Ruth, so is Christ for humanity, right? When it comes to being... What's that?
Christ bought our sin.
That's right. He sure did. I think about the shape that Naomi was in there for a little while, her and Ruth, and near starvation, right? Nowhere to turn. But they did have faith. But still, I think about the world and the shape it's in. There's people puzzled, aren't they, today, and nowhere to turn? Wouldn't you agree? Nowhere to turn. You think about the people that celebrate Christmas and Easter, celebrate Christian holidays, but they don't have a Redeemer. They go through the holiday thing, not even really knowing what it's all about, do they? Holidays that are related to Christ, but they don't know him as their Redeemer. Whether you're the worst of sinners or a morally fine person. You need a redeemer, right? You need a Savior. Acts 4:12, there is no other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. He's our Redeemer. So I think, that's another thing when you look at Boaz, and there's a vision of Christ and what Christ done for us when you look at what Boaz done for this family, right? Pretty short lesson. Anybody got anything to add?
Going along with what you was just saying about the holidays, I mean, you can do your research on where the origin of different holidays are, but I find it kind of ironic, the one for this country that is actually the most Christian holiday, giving thanks, Thanksgiving. And everybody wants to celebrate it, but it's all about gluttony.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks about giving thanks to
Yeah.
God outside of Christianity. But, they want to go through the whole, get the family together, and let's have this big feast and everything. But God's left out of it, and that was the whole principle of the holiday
Yeah.
being started,
Yeah.
giving thanks.
Appreciate you all's attention.